First and Second Kings in the Old Testament. Find your way to First Kings. We're going to start there. But title of the sermon is The Friend Who Sharpens. And the title of our message today is taken from the Proverbs of Solomon, found on page 1016 of my preaching Bible. And this is what the saying of Solomon says. Ready? As iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. So today we're going to talk about being friends in mentoring relationships. Now, most of you are either mentors or you're mentees of some kind. Maybe you're like me and you're more mental than a mentee. But as Christians, we're all supposed to be the influencers and not the sinful influenza that's been going around since our relatives from the Garden of Eden passed on the F1A1 to us. That's fatal attraction spiritual flu virus, okay? If you're a parent, it is your duty to mentor your kids and family. Dads, you listen. One day, you are going to stand before the Lord and you're going to be held accountable for you. But not just you. You're going to be held accountable for your family as well. If you're a grandparent, it's your right and your responsibility to spoil all your grandchildren equally and completely. Absolutely. But you're also supposed to mentor them into adulthood and beyond. If you're an older brother or sister, you have a role to play in the life of your younger brothers and sisters. Be an example that they can respect and grow to be like so that they too honor God in every way. If you're a coach, your job is not to just prepare your team for the game. You're supposed to prepare your team for life. Now, Coach John Wooden is one of the most respected mentors in the field of college athletics. His UCLA teams won 10 NCAA championships in 12 years. One of his most challenging students was a fellow named Bill Walton, who played for UCLA during a troubled time in America, a time of the Vietnam War, Watergate, and considerable social dissent. Although Bill Walton did rebel to a degree, Coach Wooden stayed the course with him. Today, no one speaks more eloquently about the mentoring friendship or relationship of John Wooden than Bill Walton, who is one of those sports commentators now that you hear on TV during basketball games. We thought he was nuts, Walton said. But in all his preachings and teachings, everything he told us turned out to be true. His goal was to make you the best basketball player, but first to make you the best person. He would never talk wins and losses, but what we needed to do in order to succeed in life. He handled us with extreme patience, Bill Walton said. Now, folks, as Christians, at some level or another, we are all either preparing others or we are being prepared for life and eternal life in the great kingdom of God. The Bible tells us that in the church that older men are to train and discipline younger men. And the more mature women are to teach the younger women about life and living for Jesus. A good example of mentoring relationships and friendships is found in the Bible. It comes from two guys who, over time, learned to bring out the best in each other. Their names are Elijah and Elisha. And their story is found in 1 Kings, starting in chapter 19, if you want to find your way there. So 1 Kings 19:1 says, Now Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. Now a little bit of background here, so this verse can mean more sense to us. Here it comes from the previous chapter. There we learn that Elijah was so appalled at the widespread idolatry of his day that he challenged the 450 prophets of Baal to a prayer competition. They willingly accepted, and the people, agreed to this because it was a winner-take-all. Each team was to prepare an altar to determine whose God was the greatest. The one who was real and true would be called on to send fire down from heaven to consume the offering, and that deity and his prophets, or his prophet, would be the winner in a winner-take-all contest. Now, the prophets of Baal got to go first, and so hundreds of them prayed all day long for their make-believe God to listen to them. They said, Baal, send fire, consume the altar, but there wasn't even a warm breeze. Then came Elijah's turn. He prayed for less than 20 seconds, and Jehovah sent a ball of fire from heaven to consume the altar, and he scorched the earth all around it. The people responded by falling to their knees, to their faces, and acknowledging that he was the one true God of Israel. Then Elijah ordered that all the false prophets that had been destroying the nation's love for the living God be executed. And in 1 Kings 19:2, it says, So Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them. Do you know what Elijah did next? This spiritual, miracle-working, on fire for Jehovah, courageous prophet of the Lord, man of God, who had just defeated 450 false prophets of Baal and 400 equally false prophets of Asherah, he turns tail like a scared fraidy cat, and he ran off in fear of his life. Verse 4 says, he went a day's journey into the desert, came to a broom tree, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. I have had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. Now, why would this guy who had just confronted and taunted and overcome hundreds of false prophets flee from one woman? I'm not even going to try to answer that because I often flee from one woman. I don't know the answer. But Elijah ran. And he was so down on himself that he said, I just as soon be dead, God. This is crazy. I have personally learned this, folks, that sometimes after my greatest accomplishment, sometimes I've invested myself emotionally in something or someone. And after I've been successful in that time, afterwards, the next day, generally, I become vulnerable to a letdown. And if I don't get ready for it, and if I don't do the right things, it can lead to temptation and struggles and depression and selfishness. And so you need to be aware of that. And I think this is what Elijah was going through. He had just celebrated a great victory, and now he sees no reason to live any longer because of Jezebel's threats against him, and he needs some help. God did not say to his prophet Elijah, now you just snap out of it. Man up already, or cry a river, build a bridge, and get over it. Something that I think that we can all appreciate as being great about our Father in heaven is that he understood what was going on with Elijah. And he gave him 4 gifts to help him restore his passion and his place for service. First gift, God allowed Elijah to sleep and to refresh himself physically. He was worn out. He'd been running. He'd been on the run in the desert. He sat down under this bush. He wanted to die. God said, hey, Elijah, get some sleep. Okay, take a rest. Now, let me tell you something. Sleep isn't the cure-all for everything, but it's going to help like 90% of it. Not, too much sleep. But sometimes when you're just on the go, you just need to get a good night's sleep. It makes you feel a lot better. That's what God was doing for Elijah. Okay, the second gift. He revealed himself to Elijah. Now, God spoke to him. You'll remember this. He said, go up to the cave, and there was all kinds of noise and all kinds of activity and everything. But God revealed himself in a gentle, quiet whisper, a still, small voice. And being in the presence of God lifted Elijah's spirit and gave him a better perspective. God gave him a gift of worship at that time. He could just appreciate and just live in the presence of God. Okay, the third gift. The Lord gave Elijah a new challenge. He said, Elijah, I want you to go back where you were and anoint and train some new leaders. Verse 15. The Lord said to him, go back the way you came and go to the desert of Damascus, where when you get there, anoint Hazael, king over Aram, and also anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, king over Israel. Now, one of the quickest ways out of a personal funk or a personal problem, a personal depression time here, is to get your mind off of you and on to something else, on to others in particular here, and off the past and get yourself onto a new challenge. I'm not kidding you. This is a proven formula. You're bummed out. The way to overcome that is to stop being bummed out by focusing on helping others and doing what you can to serve in that way. Okay, the fourth gift. In order to lift Elijah's spirit, God gave him someone to mentor. Look down at verse 16. God told him, and after you do all those things, I want you to anoint Elisha, son of Shaphat from Abel, Meholah, to succeed you as prophet. The key here, God is sending him, putting somebody in his life to help him so that he can overcome his depression. Now here's the first lesson. Ready? Being a mentor for the Lord brings a sense of long-term purpose. Now, few things will renew your energy like being involved in a mentoring relationship, especially if your mentee sees the big picture and is eager to learn and apply the lessons. Your attention is shifted from serving yourself to assisting another, from focusing on the past to focusing on the future. You know, I have just finally finished reading the classic novel Silas Marner by George Eliot. Because of some terrible experiences in his life, the main character, Silas Marner, has become a miserable recluse of a miser who lived only for the gold that he made spinning wool and cotton and things like that into yarn. He had no friends, and he didn't want any friends. He'd been done bad. So when his precious chest of gold was stolen, things got worse, and he had nothing to live for. But through a different tragedy of another kind, a young girl whose mother lay dying in the snow wandered into his house seeking the warmth of a fire. The girl fell asleep on the floor in front of the fire, and when Silas woke up, he noticed that his gold had somehow been returned to him. But only it wasn't gold coins, but rather the girl's golden-colored hair that he saw reflected in the light of the fireplace. In an instant, his whole miserable life became transformed. He stopped focusing on himself, and he started focusing on a little girl that he named Epi. Epi's mother is found dead in the snow nearby, and now the little girl becomes Marner's reason for living as he raises her as his own daughter. The people of the nearby town, they can't believe this change. They can't believe it's the same guy, because Silas Marner went from being the most miserable to one of the most popular men in town, simply because he had a new purpose for his life. When you get the spotlight off yourself and onto another, it does wonders for your attitude and your outlook on life. Ecclesiastes 4 verse 9 tells us, 2 are better than 1. In that their cooperative efforts yield disadvantage. If one of them falls, the other will help his partner up. Woe to him who is alone when he falls and has no one there to help him up. Now, when Elijah was depressed, God gave him an assignment to befriend and to teach a man called Elisha. And that friendship helped to change his attitude, his life, his future, and ours as well, because we, thousands of years later, have been affected positively by this relationship. In 1 Kings 19, chapter 19, verse 19, it introduces us to Elisha. So, it says, Elijah went from there and found Elisha. He was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen, and he himself was driving the 12th pair. Now, Elisha it appears to be a fairly wealthy person. He's a wealthy farmer. He has 12 plowing teams, and he's driving one team of the oxen personally. So he's also still kind of humble. Now, look, if somebody you know has 12 tractors that he's always keeping busy on the farm, you'd think, well, he's got a good business going for him. So it appears that Elisha has that. So Elijah went up to him and threw his cloak around him. Elisha then left his oxen and ran after Elijah. Let me kiss my father and mother goodbye, he said, and I'll come with you. Go back, Elijah said. What have I done to you? In other words, of course, I'm sorry I didn't think of that already. I'm just asking a lot of you. You go take care of your personal affairs. So in verse 21, Elisha left him and went back. He took his yoke of oxen and he slaughtered them. He burned the plowing equipment to cook the meat and gave it to the people, and they ate. Then he set out to follow Elijah and became his attendant. Elisha made this commitment that if this is what he's going to do with the rest of his life, there's no turning back. This is a lifelong decision. So here's the second lesson. Mentoring always requires sacrifice. Elisha was a prominent farmer, but he left everything to follow Elijah. We don't hear much about Elisha again for several chapters here in the Bible, which probably means what? He was learning to sacrifice his resources and to live in obscurity for a while as he humbly developed the training for this new calling in his life. For a mentoring relationship to be meaningful, there must be a willingness on the part of both to sacrifice time, resources, and ego. An investment in the future always requires some sacrifice in the present. Now, turn over to 2 Kings chapter 2. God had just informed Elijah that his ministry was done. It's over. And he's going to be taken up into heaven in an unusual way. Elijah is one of the two Bible characters that did not actually humanly die. He was going to be swept up into heaven in a miraculous and an extraordinary way. Elijah told his understudy that he was leaving and he would not be coming back, but Elisha insisted that no matter what, he wouldn't leave his side. He said, no, you go back. God's got something else in mind. And he goes, no, I'm sticking with you. 2 Kings 2:1. When the Lord was about to take Elijah up to heaven in a whirlwind, Elijah and Elisha were on their way from Gilgal. Elijah said to Elisha, stay here, the Lord has sent me to Bethel. But Elisha said, as surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you. So they went down to Bethel. Verse 4. Then Elijah said to him, stay here, Elisha, the Lord has sent me to Jericho. And he replied, as surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you. So they went to Jericho. Now, a number of years ago, I got to help coach the Kent Ridge High School girls basketball team. There were many late night practices and games, and we had a policy as coaches that none of our girl players would be allowed to wait alone in the dark for their parents to pick them up. Okay, we just said no to that. One night, everyone was gone. I was the last coach to leave, and I saw one of our players sitting in the dark on the curb of the parking lot waiting. I walked up and asked her, could I sit with her? And she said, I'm okay, Coach. My mom will be here any second. You can just go home. But I didn't. And I sat down next to her in the parking lot. It was a late November, cold, dark night, and we just sat there and we talked for as long as we could, and we just waited and waited and waited. About 35 minutes later, a family car pulls into the parking lot up next to the girl. Door opens. She jumps in. The mom apologizes for being late and said, thank you for taking care of my daughter. I said, you're welcome. She said, it won't happen again. And chattering my teeth as good as I could, I said, good. The girl said this, thanks, Coach. I was really mad, and I was really afraid, and I didn't want to tell you that. But thanks for staying with me, because it really helped me a lot. Elijah was about to experience something totally unknown, and he said to Elisha, you don't need to stay with me. But Elisha knew him well enough to say, there's no way that I'm leaving you alone. I'm going with you regardless of what you say. And I'm sure that Elijah appreciated his friends. All right, verse 8. Elijah took his cloak, rolled it up, struck the water of the river. The water divided to the right and to the left, and the two of them crossed over on dry ground. When they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, tell me, what can I do for you before I'm taken from you? Now, this is kind of nice because the teacher is sensitive to the needs of the student. He wants to do everything he can to help Elisha succeed. Now, look at Elisha's answer. Let me inherit a double portion of your spirit. I don't think that Elisha is being greedy or egotistical here. I think that he's seen what's happened in the life of Elijah. And being a prophet of God, he says, maybe he's thinking to himself, that's challenging, that's difficult. I just think the new guy is thinking about the people that he would be serving, and he knew that he could use all the help that he could possibly get. Verse 10, you have asked a difficult thing, Elijah said. Yet if you see me when I'm taken from you, it'll be yours, otherwise not. Now, a wise mentor recognizes that while we can train someone, we can train a student, only God alone can anoint and appoint. Their future success is ultimately up to God, not to us. Verse 11, as they were walking along and talking together, suddenly a chariot of fire and horses of fire appeared and separated the two of them. And Elijah went up into heaven in a whirlwind. This is where we get that song, Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, coming forward to carry me home. I looked over Jordan, and what did I see? Coming forward to carry me home? A band of angels coming after me, coming forward to carry me home. Remember that song? Verse 12. Elisha saw this and cried out, my father, the chariots and the horsemen of Israel. And Elisha saw him no more. But he had seen the chariot, and the mantle had been passed to him. Verse 14. Then he took the cloak that had fallen from him and struck the water with it. Where now is the Lord, the God of Elijah, he asked. When he struck the water, it divided to the right and to the left, and he crossed over. The company of the prophets from Jericho who were watching said, the spirit of Elijah is resting on Elisha. And they went to meet him and bowed to the ground before him. Now here's a third lesson. Mentoring means being so successful that you can step aside one day. I remember a television commercial from years ago, and there was a man that was saying, we need to be adults who raise our kids to become adults, to raise their kids to become adults. The main idea was this. We need to be thinking and living in more than just the selfish here and now. There is a future, and we need for our kids to do more than just pay taxes so we can live off of them. We need leaders to take us into the next generation to everyone's benefit. And if you are a wise mentor, you are going to do your best to be replaced one day. So, you do your best and you overcome fear and doubts and concerns because you want to help your student who is your teammate. You want to help your child to become a success so that it benefits you in the future. And so you work hard to help them become that, and you know when it's time to step aside. That's what Elijah did with Elisha. I want to share one last final illustration and then a closing thought with you. One day, a sophomore at Amherst College took a pair of shoes to be repaired to a shop run by a man named Jim Lucy. Lucy started a conversation with the shy young man, and they became friends. The student stopped by frequently at the shop. Student went on to become a lawyer, and with the help of Jim Lucy, he found a shop in Northampton, Massachusetts, not far from the shoe repair shop. Their friendship grew, and the young man dropped by often to visit with him and the men who gathered there. Soon, he gained the respect of the men, and before long, he was urged to run for political office in Northampton. A few years later, he was elected mayor. That was the first step in his political ladder. Before long, the young man had been elected to the state legislature in Boston, and finally, Massachusetts voters made him the governor. In his office, he attracted the attention of national politicians, and at the national convention, the governor's name was put on the ticket for vice president. Well, his party won. But within 3 years, the president was fatally stricken, and in August of 1923, the former Amherst College student was sworn into the highest office in the land. A while later, a letter was hand-delivered to Jim Lucy's shop in Northampton. It was from the White House, and it read, "Dear Mr. Lucy, not often do I see you or write to you. But I want you to know that if it were not for you, I should not be here. I want to tell you how much I love you. Do not work too much now and try to enjoy yourself in your well-earned hour of age. Yours sincerely, President Calvin Coolidge. The impact of a mentoring friendship is not often realized for many years. We need to be understanding about that, doing all that we can to help, but be willing to step aside when that time comes. So, be faithful, be patient, be loving, and don't grow weary in doing good, even if you have teenagers. Because God promises in due time you will reap a harvest if you don't give up. Jesus told his disciples, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I'm with you always to the very end of the age. That's what we're to do. All of us. We're either teaching or we're being taught. But there's always a dual process going on there. When you become a Christian, Jesus Christ is your Savior, Lord, and mentor. You and I get to be both mentor and mentee until we finally make it home. This life is a do-it-yourself project, but it is not a do-it-all-by-yourself project. We have the Lord and we have each other to make it through. So let's all make the most of our opportunities and our friendships to honor God and to help one another. Would you all stand with me, please? Take a songbook near you and turn to number 526.